Hey guys, welcome to this week's podcast episode. I've got a fantastic guest from you all the way from Nashville, David Ask, and our conversation is going to talk about business, entrepreneurship. He's got a fantastic story, his creative process, and overcoming obstacles, resilience. And I'm happy to provide David as inspirational motivation and as a guest on the show. So, David, welcome.
Well, thanks for having me, Dr. Lou. This is exciting and an honor to be on your podcast. I looked at your social presence and you are all over the place, man.
Yeah, I love that. I always get that. You're everywhere, and
Yeah.
yeah, you're the driving force behind StatGuardPlus.com, and it's a product showcase in over 3,000 retail giants, such as Home Depot, Lowe's, and so kind of talk about your story, how you got started, provide the listeners some backdrop, and we'll get right into it.
Man, I tell you what, I love to share this and for so many reasons. I'm a 49-year-old, father of two. My wife Lisa and I, like you said, live outside of Nashville, and I grew up in a little town in Minnesota called Glenwood. It's just a wonderful place to grow up. And there were so many people that I was surrounded with who, ran small businesses and some large businesses and things like that. And, you know, I I just always was, kind of gravitated to, the entrepreneurs. Every time I would see somebody, even when I was really young, selling something or doing something that just seemed kind of outside the normal 8 to 5, type, career, I was so intrigued by their personalities and, just kind of what made those people tick. In fact, Dr. Lou, I heard this just recently that only, I think it's between 3 and 5% of the population is actually, an entrepreneurial kind of a person. There are a lot of people who kind of, start businesses and things, but when they actually dial in that definition of an entrepreneur, it's a really small number.
Yeah.
And so what's really funny is I had no idea what I wanted to do. And the only thing I really did well growing up was make people laugh. And I can actually sing really well. So I've actually cut like 4 records and I've sung on stages all over the country and things like that. But it was one of those things where I wasn't sure that, if kind of that was my thing. And I still do that, by the way. I've got a couple of concerts this month and so on. But with regards to my business and my, the Stat Guard Plus. So just as a side note, my product is a thermostat guard with a combination lock. So it's basically more for commercial settings, right? Restaurants and offices and places like that where you've got a lot of people that would, either customers or employees that are messing around with the thermostat. But mine solves the problem of the lost key. So I'm the first and original thermostat guard in the world with a combination lock.
Mhm.
And so anyway, as far as the story behind that goes, I was actually working in facilities management for a large retail chain. And of course, in all of our locations, we would use stat guards because everybody wanted a different temperature, right? And we all know about the thermostat wars. So anyway, the problem though was, people had a hard time keeping up with that key. And so this invention was kind of a, a partnership with my brother-in-law. He called me one day and he said, David, where do I get a stat guard with a combo lock? And, I'm like, I'll find one. And it really wasn't honestly on my radar, like in that moment. I know we talked a little bit and I'm like, man, I can't even find one. And we ended up going into business together initially. And then I bought him out a few years later. But it was one of those things where, out of the gate, I don't know how to do this. Thus the word entrepreneur, right? You're busting new ground every day. Just, okay, here's a problem, here's an obstacle. I'm either going to climb over it, around it, through it, and we're going to figure it out. And so anyway, that's kind of the genesis of it. And of course, here we are 10 years later, and I'm in 3,000 retail stores, and we sell in various outlets online, things like that. And I love product development. I just love the process of starting with nothing, starting with an idea and then bringing something to the market that solves people's problems. So
Yeah. Yeah, and I can hear the passion in your voice. And so, kind of talking about we talked about, from idea to the Home Depot and Lowe's. And so one question is, so we talk about this idea of entrepreneurship, and it's really interesting because the United States was founded on entrepreneurialism, and now
Yeah.
yeah, and it's like it's founded on entrepreneurial, but is everybody's like going to jobs, and but then it's interesting, 3 to 5% are entrepreneurial or entrepreneurs. And so you talk about this idea of crushing the serpent's head and the internal life of an entrepreneur. What is that?
Man, so it obviously that language sounds, fiery and all that kind of thing. But you know what? It kind of is. I mean, for someone to get where you're at, right? Go through years of education and kind of come out the other side of a career with options and things like that. We all have to overcome, the shadow side of ourselves, right?
Yeah,
We need to there's a whole lot going on, in our own minds, these upper limit challenges, these obstacles that are, sometimes just complete bogus, right? And quite often it's that jerk in the mirror that I need to look at and be like, hey, hold on a minute. And then also, I believe we live in a world that has a spiritual realm to it, and there's forces that are causing us to, steer off into the ditch.
mm,
So my friend Scott one time, so one of the other things that I do is I'm part of the ISI mastermind, Iron Sharpens Iron, and I facilitate two of those groups. Well, one of the guys in the group told me one day, because I was kind of just talking negative. I'm talking, you know, um, just this head trash kind of pops up, and I started kind of rehearsing some of that. And
yeah.
he cuts me off, and he says, David, he said, take your heel and crush the serpent's head. You've got trash, coming into your heart and into your mind, trying to steer you off of something that you were so sure about last week.
Yeah,
And it's nothing but a mental, obstacle, just fear, right? Cropping up. And you need to grab that guy and chuck him out the door. And so I love the idea of not, not trying to, well, how about this? If you had someone in your home, right, who's trying to steal from you or hurt your family, you're not going to try to talk him out of it. And hey, sir, would you mind, walking out the door you came in, and here's a bologna sandwich or something, right? You're probably going to pick up something really heavy and start screaming and say, get out of here, or you're going to have a big fight on your hands. And so what was Scott telling me, right? He's telling me, David, see what is coming into your mind that's getting you off course and chuck that guy out the door. And
yeah,
it's, I'll be honest, I don't think there's an entrepreneur alive who doesn't deal with that. And most of the time that's the problem, right? We can
yeah.
solve practical problems, but most of the problem is in our own heart and in our own mind.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And then so kind of talking about obstacles. And so one thing is in your journey, what are the top three elements you found essential in your life for breaking through obstacles?
Man, what a great question.
Yeah.
I really I would start with self-awareness. So, this idea of, you know, who you are. When we always talk about your why matters. Simon Sinek wrote that book, Start with Why, and I love that. But I really think there's a precursor to that, and it's starting with who.
Mm,
So, what makes me different from, the person next to me? What is it that lights me up? What is it that gives, I always like to say, what is it that gives my goosebumps?
yeah.
What is it that I'm willing to suffer for? What is it that makes me mad? That I feel like I want to fight for, that kind of thing,
Yeah.
because it's different for other people. So that sense of self-awareness, I think, is really, really important. And then, on a real basic level, it's who you surround yourself with. And we all know that for those of us who have children, right? You never want your kids, caught up in the wrong crowd. I
Yeah.
mean, instinctively, we get it as parents, but guess what? Quite often we don't internalize that for ourselves.
Mm,
And we become like the top 5 people that we spend the most time with. And I forget who said that. I'm actually quoting someone there.
yeah.
But so this idea of self-awareness, spend time with people that you really admire, that you trust, that have your best in mind. And then I would say too is just be a learner, read books, listen to podcasts, right? Ask questions, be really curious about, what's possible and how someone else might be doing something that might be a bit more efficient or better, or how about this? How about somebody that just helps you understand that you're saying yes to too many things and it's time to say no to something.
Yeah.
So that might be, something I deal with because I can say yes to a lot of things.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And once I figured out, the haters and the naysayers, and kind of in trying to do something that nobody's done before, so you have to kind of find models and shortcuts and kind of you can copy your way to success.
Hmm.
Once I understood that, and I started limiting my time with just people that drag you down, and
Yeah.
um uh one thing that I really love is in this idea of overcoming obstacles is that there's I was on the listening to this really great podcast, and it's talking about looking for the gifts in challenges and obstacles and setbacks, and it's actually gift as opposed to getting frustrated. So reflecting on your path, what aspects of your story or background do you now realize more instrumental in your success than you initially thought?
Yeah. I like that, the topic of setbacks, the topic
Yeah.
of failures, the topic of, that struggle and so on. It's truth of the matter is it sounds kind of pie in the sky when you want to put a nice spin on it. Well, everybody has failures. Look at, how many times Thomas Edison failed and
Yeah.
Michael Jordan, all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But the truth of the matter is the failures are what cause you, right? If you push through them, to become the person that you need to be in order to do the things that you want to do.
Yeah.
The this idea, my son is 18 years old and he's just like, he's jacked. He's at the gym all the time. He's just this young, strapping, good looking dude.
Yeah.
And he's in his first year of college right now.
Yeah.
And so here's what's funny, right? Parker can go to the gym and push all kinds of weights. I mean, he can lift twice as much as I can. And at the same time, he's building new muscles in his first year in college. But in essence, it's the same thing, right? Where it's whether you're pushing heavy weight and tearing down muscle and becoming stronger in your body. I mean, right? As a doctor, you go to college, you're tearing down mental muscle, emotional muscle to push through, right? Do hard things.
Yeah.
And you're building back, those emotional, spiritual, mental muscles in a way that cause you to become the person you need to be in order to lift that weight. And so those failures, that's the heavy lifting. It's the tearing down and the building back up. Thus the word resilience, right? There would be no word resilience unless you had a failure or a problem or you fell down. One requires the other.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And just reflecting on the journey, and I know it's kind of cliche, but they always say, the joy lies in the journey. And it's really interesting. Like you have peak experiences, but those last only like they could last for a day or a week, whatever. But
Yeah.
it's like, and we'll do more to avoid pain than to go for pleasure. And so like these experiences, they is what they call that, trial by fire, or, kind of
Mm,
sharpening the sword or sharpening
yeah.
the iron.
Yeah.
Which and we're more apt to learn from failure as opposed to success. So um
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Mm,
Um, so one thing is talking about this so basically we've talked about this. One thing that's interesting is this creative process, and I've always entrepreneurs, creatives, artists, we're all creative. So with your history of creating successful products, and could you share what motivates and fuels your continuous innovation and product development?
yeah. So, it's funny. So I'll just be honest about this, right? When I went through COVID in my business, just like millions of others, right? We just about went under.
Mm,
So part of that is, hey, I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm putting two kids through college right now. So part of my motivation, right, on a very practical level, is to pay the light bill and put some kids through college.
yeah.
And at the same time, right, when you hit a little bit of a certain level where you've got consistent income and that kind of stuff,
Oh,
well, it's amazing how your imagination starts to kind of open up a little bit. You feel that psychological safety. Well, so what's interesting here is coming through COVID, And now coming out the other side, we had a record month last month in retail. Last week was our best week ever in business. And
Uh-huh.
and so what's fascinating is, right, if you start getting some wins after a decade of struggle,
Yeah.
well, now it's like my imagination, my heart is opening up a bit more to, okay, what's possible here? So I actually went and joined the Nashville Entrepreneur Center, and I'm hanging out with, of course, men in my mastermind group that are, starting businesses and, developing products and things like that. And I like to just help. No, if there's a way for me to be involved on a business level, fine. But either way, I think to see where someone is where I was a decade ago, right? And to say,
Yeah.
hey, stand on my shoulders here. Let me, learn from me. Because I'd made a lot of mistakes, and I'd love for you to not make as many, and have fewer obstacles. So it's a joy to see someone, in the land of the free and the home of the brave here, right? We have options. There's many countries that don't have options, right? They're looking for clean water.
Yeah.
And so I believe that, the good king has called us to multiply, period. So
Yeah.
my job is to multiply that which is put in my hands and help other people do the same thing. And
Yeah.
I get really, really excited about that.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And so kind of I'm a spiritual person.
Yeah,
Not so much, that's like there's and what I love is really because basically in our world I've seen it basically the decline of morals and just kind of
yeah.
politicians, corporations, and there's more need for individuals such as yourself. We need more people with integrity and people doing the right thing, not just hoarding and
Oh, yeah, yeah.
you know so kind of we have around 5 more minutes, but kind of talking about what inspires you to get up early each morning, drive your ventures forward, and then kind of talk about what is next, some immediate action for listeners, and end it on a positive note.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you. And I just so appreciate the time to explore some of these things in a bit of a spotlight here.
Yeah.
It's funny. There's a guy named Jim Rohn, and he says he has this saying, and he said, people always ask me why I get up so early in the morning. And he said, I always respond, if you knew where I was going, you'd be up early too.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I do, so Dr. Andy Garrett and I work closely together. He's in my mastermind group, but we actually coach people through, this idea of building an identity, right? Who are you and what's your purpose? Well, people think that that's something that's discovered, that's out there in the ethosphere or the universe or whatever. Well,
Yeah.
guess what? It's not. If you have someone, you know, I didn't make me, right? I didn't choose my eye color. I didn't choose my taste buds. I didn't choose my personality.
Uh-huh.
That the word authenticity comes from the word author, right?
Yeah.
With those of us who have children, right? I've got my siblings and my kids, they came out of the hopper, if you will, very different. And
Yeah.
young children are not thinking about being authentic. They're just doing their deal. So
Yeah.
what we do is we help people understand this idea of who are you, right? Authenticity. And when you start identifying that with the English language here, right? Writing those things down by answering really powerful questions,
Yeah.
well, that's your identity. And what's really wonderful is when you act, out of that place, right? Who am I and who am I not? And you give people permission around you to do that same beautiful, courageous thing.
Yeah.
It's so wonderful how your world starts to expand. The sense of generousness and psychological safety around you starts to expand. Everything from I have an idea on a product or a song or a book or whatever that is that we're creating, right? We're all creators. It's amazing how, for me personally, right? You asked me what gets me out of bed in the morning.
Yeah.
I love to walk alongside people validating. By the way, my Dr. Lou, my favorite quote is by Benjamin Disraeli. He's the former PM of England back in the 1800s, but
Yeah.
the quote is the greatest good you can do for another is not to share with him your riches, but to reveal to him his own.
Oh,
And I just love this idea, whether it's, my children or my wife or my friends or whoever I come in contact with. If I see something great in somebody,
yeah.
say something, right? Validate that, point it out, spotlight it.
Yeah.
So whether it's product development or songwriting or whatever somebody's doing, I love to spotlight that truest, not just the true things, but the truest things about someone that are really, really great. And the rest of life is a bit of a context for me to do those things. That's what really fires me up in the morning. So I know
Yeah.
that's a bit maybe philosophical and deep, but that's how I roll. So
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And we need especially end of the year kind of contemplating what where we've been moving forward into 2024. We need
yeah.
inspiration. So how can people contact you, check out your website, your work, follow you,
Sure.
etc.?
Yeah. So, again, I would, I'm putting my kids through college, that kind of thing, right? So my Stat Guard, if you visit StatGuard Plus, StatGuard plus.com, we're in stores and online and so on. We're the first and original. And then also my website is davidask.com. And if you want to email me, it's hello@davidask.com.
Yeah. Yeah. And for all the audience out there, I love talking to inspirational entrepreneurs, especially at the end of the year, get me motivated for next year. And all of David's resources will be in the links and show notes. Be sure to check all of them out. Follow, give him a like, follow. And with that, thanks so much for coming onto the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me.